He never wore a crown. Yet kings owed him their thrones. In a world ruled by empires, one man learned to rule the empires themselves, not with armies, not with blood, but with numbers. He built an invisible kingdom where every coin was a soldier and every debt a weapon. Frankfurt, 18th century. In the narrow alleys of the Judengasse, the Jewish ghetto, life was measured not in riches, but in survival. The walls were tight, the air stale, and hope was rationed. Among the noise of barter and prayer, a young boy named Mayer Amschel Rothschild stared at the world outside the gates. Not with envy, but calculation. He wasn't born into power, he was born into limits. But he learned early that limits could be traded, just like currency. By day, he cleaned coins for merchants. By night, he studied them. Every engraving, every mint mark, every story metal could tell. To him, coins weren't just money. They were history in miniature, the fingerprints of empires. He collected them, cataloged them, and soon sold them to collectors who valued knowledge as much as gold. And among those collectors was a man who would change his life, Prince William of Hesse. One of Europe's richest nobles, William was fascinated by rare coins. Mayer sold him coins, but more importantly, he sold him trust. The trust became deposits, and those deposits became opportunity. He didn't conquer his world, he negotiated with it. Welcome to the history of debt, where money and power share the same bloodline. How did one man, born in a ghetto, end up financing empires and deciding the fate of nations? In a time when Jews were forbidden from owning land or joining guilds, Mayer found the one business no ruler could ban: money itself. He understood that wealth wasn't just possession, it was permission. Through the Prince of Hesse, Mayer began managing investments, trading currencies, and moving capital across Europe. He earned reputation not by greed, but by reliability, the rarest currency of all. When others flaunted their wealth, Mayer kept silent. When others gambled, he calculated. He turned secrecy into strength. And then came his greatest move, his 5 sons. Each one was trained not just as a banker, but as an emissary. Mayer sent them across Europe: Amschel in Frankfurt, Salomon in Vienna, Nathan in London, Karl in Naples, and James in Paris. Before telegraphs, before telephones, before international law, there was the Rothschild network. Couriers carried letters sealed in wax, coded in languages only the family could read. Information moved faster through their system than any army could march. They didn't just build a business, they built a web. Mayer understood that power isn't about having gold. It cares about moving it faster than anyone else. His sons became his extensions, his eyes and hands in 5 capitals. And in those capitals, kings began to notice. The Rothschilds could move money where governments couldn't. They could fund wars that treasuries couldn't afford. They became the quiet machinery beneath every throne. While Europe burned with revolution and ambition, the family from the Frankfurt ghetto built bridges of gold that armies marched across. And in the midst of this growing empire, Mayer kept one rule above all: unity. The family must remain one body, one purpose. He wrote strict family laws: no outside partners, no public boasting, no division. Wealth could grow, but loyalty could never be sold. He was creating more than a dynasty. He was creating a code. Then came the storm that tested it all: the Napoleonic Wars. Across Europe, kings fell, empires cracked, and gold became the blood that kept armies alive. Governments were desperate. They needed loans, weapons, supplies. But who could they trust when their own treasuries were collapsing? They turned to the Rothschilds. Nathan Rothschild in London became the key. Through his father's network, he moved gold across borders under the eyes of enemy patrols. Couriers disguised as traders carried fortunes hidden in barrels and crates. The Rothschilds financed Britain's armies, helped pay the troops that fought Napoleon, and ensured supplies reached the front. While cannons thundered, the Rothschild couriers rode in silence. But their greatest power wasn't gold, it was information. The Rothschild network knew who won or lost battles days before newspapers printed it. They could anticipate the tides of war and invest accordingly. When Waterloo ended Napoleon's reign, Nathan Rothschild was among the first in London to know. To the public, it looked like magic. To Mayer's sons, it was math. They didn't gamble, they calculated. And while soldiers fought for crowns, the Rothschilds fought for control of credit, the real throne of the modern age. They became indispensable to kings, indispensable to governments. Without their loans, wars would stall. Without their trust, economies would crumble. For the first time in history, power no longer belonged only to those who held the sword, but to those who held the debt. When money becomes power, Mayer once said, the man who controls credit controls history. And control it, they did. After Napoleon's fall, the Rothschilds didn't retreat. They built. They helped rebuild Europe's shattered economies, financing railroads, industries, and governments. They became the unspoken architects of stability. Monarchs courted them. Diplomats consulted them. Rivals envied them. In the corridors of power, their name became a whisper, part admiration, part fear. They had no army, no throne, yet no one dared to defy them. When Mayer Amschel Rothschild died in 1812, he left behind not just wealth, but a structure so powerful it survived him. His sons carried his legacy into every capital of Europe, turning trust into empires and influence into inheritance. Each son became a pillar of modern finance. Nathan built London into the world's financial heart. James turned Paris into a hub of banking and industry. Salomon dominated Austria's markets. Karl guided Naples. Amschel maintained the family seat in Frankfurt. They didn't compete, they cooperated. A single loan could be raised in Paris, guaranteed in London, and repaid in Vienna, all within the family. They created the first true multinational financial institution, a century before the term existed. But as their power grew, so did the myths. The public began to imagine them as puppet masters controlling nations. Pamphlets accused them of starting wars for profit, of owning kings, of secretly ruling Europe. In truth, they didn't need to control everything. They only needed to be needed. Real power rarely announces itself. It whispers, negotiates, and waits. And that was Mayer's final lesson to his sons. Invisibility is invincibility. The more Europe depended on them, the less the world could see where their influence began or ended. They had transcended class, religion, and geography. They had become a system. From the ghettos of Frankfurt to the palaces of Europe, the Rothschilds turned prejudice into leverage, exclusion into innovation. Their story wasn't about greed, it was about survival through strategy. They had learned that when society shuts you out, you build your own door and make others pay to walk through it. Over time, the family withdrew from the spotlight. The banks they founded became institutions. The systems they created became the skeleton of global finance, bonds, central banking, state credit, and international loans. Even today, the very concept of a bond market traces its DNA to the Rothschilds' methods. The architecture of global debt, the idea that nations themselves can borrow against the future, began with them. They didn't just change money, they changed time itself. From a ghetto gold trader to the patriarch of Europe. This greatest financial dynasty, Mayer Rothschild. This journey defied every law of power. He never wore armor, never commanded soldiers, never ruled a country. But he ruled something far greater, trust. He understood that gold could be seized, but credit must be earned. That the true empire of the modern age wasn't built on land, but on confidence. The belief that money lent today would return tomorrow. And so he conquered time, turning tomorrow's money into today's power. He lived and died in a world that refused him equality, yet he built a system that made emperors his clients. Kings once commanded men, Mayer commanded their debts. And when he passed, his sons carried the torch, not to rule nations, but to make them possible. It's easy now to see the Rothschild name as legend, myth, or conspiracy. But before the legend, there was a man counting coins under candlelight, dreaming of a freedom only numbers could buy. The story of Mayer Rothschild isn't just about money. It's about what happens when knowledge, discipline, and vision collide in a world that underestimates you. He didn't conquer with weapons. He conquered with understanding. And that's the debt history still owes him. If stories like this make you see history differently, don't just scroll, subscribe. Because here, on the history of debt, we expose the deals, the dynasties, and the debts that built our world. You'll never see power the same way again.